welcome to this side event organized by the International Environmental Organization Bellona together with American Sunlight Project. My name is Yuri Sergeyev and I am Arctic Project Advisor at the Bellona Environmental Transparency Center, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. At first glance, propaganda and the environment may seem like two separate issues, but in reality they are deeply connected, especially in the current geopolitical situation. And the Arctic also could not avoid it. Decisions about shipping routes, extractive industries, and climate policy are shaped not only by facts, but also by narratives. And when those narratives are deliberately distorted, the consequences can be very real for fragile ecosystems and for the people who depend on them. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, we have seen how disinformation has become a core instrument of state policy. This affects not only military or political debates, but also environmental ones. Russian state media actively promote narratives portraying the Arctic and especially the Northern Sea route as safe, economically viable, and environmentally sustainable. These claims circulate far beyond Russia's borders and increasingly enter international discussions. Today's event focuses on why these narratives are misleading, how they are constructed, and why they matter. Because when false claims about safety, sustainability, or economic benefits go unchallenged, they influence policy decisions, and those decisions can have long-lasting environmental consequences in Arctic. We will begin with two presentations. First, Benjamin Schultz, lead researcher at the American Sunlight Project, will examine how Russian propaganda operates in the international information space, including digital platforms, and how environmental topics are used to manipulate public opinion. He will be followed by Ksenia Vakhrusheva, project manager and Arctic project advisor at the Bellona Environmental Transparency Center, who will outline how Russian state narratives frame Arctic development and the Northern Sea route, and why these narratives do not stand up to scrutiny. After this presentation, we will move to a panel discussion joined by two additional speakers. Dr. Sean Pryor, lead advisor at the Clean Arctic Alliance, will bring a policy and advocacy perspective on how disinformation affects environmental regulation and international cooperation. And Thomas Nilsson, editor of the Barents Observer, will share insights from years of reporting on the Arctic and confronting disinformation in real time. Together, we will discuss how false narratives about the Arctic are created, why they persist, and most importantly, how they can be challenged to protect the environment and climate in the region. After the panel discussion, we will open the floor for questions from the audience. With that, let us begin, and I'm pleased to give the floor to our first speaker, Benjamin. The floor is yours.
I guess you move forward, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Super. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you. Great to be here. It's my first time in Tromsø and at Arctic Frontiers, and this is a really awesome event, and thanks to Bellona and everyone for the opportunity. So today I'm going to be telling you a bit about our new research that we've done in partnership with Bellona, looking at Russian disinformation about the Northern Sea route. So we'll jump right in. But before I start, because I recognize that everyone here might not be a super expert on disinformation, I did just want to start with a couple basics, couple clarifying slides to sort of set the stage. So just to start, we hear the words disinformation and misinformation a lot, right? Would everyone kind of agree we hear these rather interchangeably? But there is a meaningful difference between them. Disinformation is information that's false, malign, malicious, and it's spread with an intent to harm. Misinformation is if you see this and you don't know it's false and you repost it. So you don't have the intent to harm, you just saw a post that you liked. And so just as we think about this discussion, we're talking about disinformation created by the Kremlin with the intent to harm not only the information environment, but the real environment as well. I think this is probably fairly well known, but Russia operates the most robust disinformation sort of campaigns that we see today, targeting all sorts of Western countries, democracies around the world. And the main goal here is really not to necessarily promote one side or the other. We see this increasingly, certainly in the US, given the increasingly difficult political situation. disinformation from all sides of the spectrum, especially the far right, but all sides, is promoted by different Russian bot networks and accounts and spread with the intent to destabilize, tear at the social fabric, and disinformation about the Northern Sea Route and the Arctic in general, aimed at various democracies in this region, is no exception. The aim is to tear at the social fabric, divide, and destroy. Just a couple quick keywords here. There's a few operations that have been, I think, in the news in the last, let's say, year-ish. Matryoshka, Doppelganger, Overload. I won't get into the really specifics of these, but these are various campaigns that have reached millions and millions of people across various countries in our region here in Europe, in the Americas, again, aiming to tear at the social fabric, promote false content that is divisive, makes you really angry, really mad. At the American Sunlight Project, we really like to say, if you're enraged, you're probably a little too engaged and you might be being manipulated. Take that with a grain of salt, though, because there's a lot of enraging stuff online these days. And we'll skip a couple forward here, but in the last year, we've observed a couple of different tactics. One of them being LLM grooming. It's this idea that if you push enough bad information into the information environment, LLMs like ChatGPT, Claude, or Perplexity, etc., they will pick this information up and cite it. We did some work at the American Sunlight Project about a year ago in which we kind of theorized this was happening, and since then numerous studies have shown that when you ask AI models about, for instance, the war in Ukraine or Donald Trump, divisive hot topics, roughly between 13 to 25% of the time, depending on the study, there's been several, these models will cite overt Kremlin propaganda. A big problem given how many people use LLMs. I'll talk about this a bit more further on. Just a couple of, again, basic images, just to kind of give you the impression of what we're dealing with here. These are some wonderful doppelganger websites. And what do we mean by this? Doppelganger, if there's any Germans, I'm sure you know what this means. But essentially, it's a duplicate, a fake. Now, these are fake websites. If anyone's living in, let's say, Western Central Europe, you've probably read 20 Minutes. It's published in a number of languages, and the Russians created a wonderful portal that looks just like it. The average person will not know that's fake, but that's a fake website. And ditto for Der Spiegel and some other publications as well. There's another campaign that has personally affected us, and I'm sure some others in the room. This would be Overload, and what they do is they overload you. They send you wonderful spam messages saying, hey, fact check this, sending 10, 20, 30, 40 a week, a month, whatever. And if you don't know it's fake, you'll go to try to fact check it, and you'll waste your time, and you won't be working on the things that actually matter. One of many devious tactics. And, of course, there's been some wonderful pages in the last decade in the US, now increasingly in other countries, Canada, the UK, which actually organize real events in person. But these web pages are based in Moscow or St. Petersburg. They are not actually American activists, Canadian activists, etc. Again, this is not environmentally related, but just to give you the impression of what we're analyzing and looking at. Now, this is a wonderful headline from our friends at the Barents Observer, one of the best things I've ever read in my life. But now we start to talk about the Arctic, yeah? So it's, I think, pretty established at this point that climate change and the Arctic have been divisive topics for a while. I'm not a science guy, so I can't give you the details. Ksenia is going to do that. But the Russian state loves to talk about all sorts of things related to climate change. And, of course, there's a number of anti-science opinions that have, let's say, grown in popularity in recent years. And this is a favorite of malign actors from the Kremlin and other affiliated actors. They love to amplify these. There's been plenty of research that's been done that shows that climate disinformation makes up the largest chunk of disinformation about the Arctic. I think that's not really a surprise to everybody, but again, some recent research has reinforced this and shown it to be the case. And And our own work, we worked on a report with Bologna called about a bot network that we called EcoBoost, and essentially what this bot network does, we traced it back to Russia because every time there's an internet outage in Moscow, suddenly the network stops working. Funny how that works, right? And it's about 700 accounts. They're fully AI generated, automated, and they love to retweet all sorts of stuff and post all sorts of stuff saying, hey, don't vote for Labor, vote for Green. Hey, Elon Musk is wonderful, buy a Tesla. These kinds of things. And they actually talk all about climate, but often from the pro-climate side, which is a bit atypical. I'll touch on this in a second. But again, reinforcing that climate is one of the largest things talked about in terms of Arctic disinformation from Russia. And of course, the Kremlin, very active online, offline, plenty of sabotage and things happening in real life as well. So now to the Northern Sea Route. This was the main subject of our kind of novel research that we've worked on for this. Russian narratives around the Northern Sea Route actually kind of buck the trend a little bit, and I'll talk about this. Typically, as I just mentioned, disinformation about the Arctic originating from the Kremlin will talk about climate change, but this probably makes sense once I say it out loud, but disinformation from Russia about the Northern Sea Route actively avoids climate change, again, bucking the trend that I just talked about. And the reason for this, as we're going to talk about a bit further on, is quite simple. Russia wants to develop the Northern Sea Route, and it's spreading plenty of information online, trying to manipulate opinions in favor of this. What's interesting is through our research, we found that the majority of disinformation originating from the Kremlin talking about the Northern Sea Route is actually laundered through the Pravda network. So I talked about LLM grooming before, and this is really important here. The Pravda network, it's a collection of different portals online published in probably about 6 languages at this point. And there's a couple hundred different portals aimed at countries as far away as New Zealand, countries as near as Norway, in languages from Scottish Gaelic all the way to Spanish to, let's say, I don't know, Chinese. Really, this is a globe-spanning network. And it produces roughly 3 to 4 million articles a year. I mean, this is thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of content a day. And this is what's getting swept up by LLMs, just for the record. And so we found in our research, and I'm going to go through some of the content that we looked at, we found that the vast majority of it was laundered through this Pravda network. And what's interesting is that mirroring tactics we saw in the US starting a decade ago, in 2016 during that election, we see that discussions of the Northern Sea Route that have been laundered through this network and originate narrative-wise from the Kremlin, they're actually woven into different topics of discussion. So whether that's history, you know, we're so great, we've done so many things, we can conquer the Northern Sea Route, or the current invasion of Ukraine. This is, you know, from the Kremlin's perspective, this is a fight for freedom, yada, yada, whatever they're saying. Also, we deserve the Northern Sea Route because that's freedom, et cetera. And it's kind of similar to tactics we saw in the US in which Russian actors would talk about how great Trump was in a sports forum, for instance, or in a car or gun forum or something like this, right? Trying to weave these malign narratives into different discussions to try to get as many people as possible to reach them. So, now to the meat of this. We've analyzed more than 2,200 different posts in the English language, just for simplicity here, mentioning specific key terms. So the key terms, as you can see, Northern Sea Route, Northeast Passage, Trans-Arctic Corridor. And they originate from a selection of different sources here. So we can see WhatsApp communities, Telegram, Fediverse, Gab, Getter, Parler, Truth Social, and VK. So all sorts of quote-unquote alternative media sources that are fairly easy to access that we were able to pull data from. We also analyzed around 1,500 posts from X, unfortunately only qualitatively because for those who are not tech policy experts, unfortunately major tech platforms in recent years have imposed severe restrictions on the amount of data that you're able to publicly collect as a researcher. So unfortunately, if you don't have $40,000 a month to pay for the API for X, you can't download the data and all the things that come with it. So we just analyzed these qualitatively. Now I'll show you sort of what these narratives and these posts are talking about. So this is just a word cloud. Looks like a lot going on, because there is. But there's a number of interesting terms that jump out immediately, right? We see a strong emphasis transport corridor. China is right there in the middle. This is one of the favorite narratives of the malign actors that we've looked at, whether it's the Pravda network or different channels like Sputnik, RT, or even diplomatic accounts from the foreign ministry, etc. They love to talk about China and Brazil. So we can see Lula da Silva up at the top as well. They love to talk about their nuclear icebreakers. They love to talk about developing the Far East, turning it into an economic powerhouse, competing with Western hegemony. These kinds of narratives, these start to become visible with an analysis like this, but again, that's just cursory for now. Topic-wise, we ran a topic model, and we found some interesting things. So when we divided up all the posts that we looked at, again, almost 4,000 or so, we got about 8 topics. There is some overlap here, but again, some interesting things emerge. When we started this analysis a bit earlier last year, let's say October, November, these topics looked very different. You can see the addition of Greenland here, topic 3. That started to work its way into narratives around the Northern Sea Route, for instance, stating that Russia needs to protect people from different invasions, almost taking kind of an anti-US stance in some cases. Again, the goal being to divide and tear apart. But we can see some interesting topics emerging here. Just a couple of example posts I'll run through with you. This was from, I'm not remembering exactly which Telegram channel this is, but the point is there's a lot of different graphics that they like to post that are favorable to Russia, as well as pushing claims such as being in favor of this greater Eurasian partnership. The theme of Eurasia comes through strikingly throughout the different content sources and pieces of content promoted by the Kremlin, this idea of kind of a competitive Eurasia that will take down the West or compete with the West, that comes through clearly. That's a lot of text. Don't worry about reading it. Point being, Eurasia, again, all the different stand countries, the Caucasus, etc. Russia loves to talk about in the Pravda network how these countries and kind of non-aligned or peripheral countries will benefit from the development of the Northern Sea Route. And there's also talk, again, about pushing back on the US and Canada, the UK, etc., through development of the Northern Sea Route. And I talked about icebreakers. Putin also loves to talk about icebreakers. This video was shared all over. It's one of many that was, but again, the idea is with this kind of content that Russia is the only country that actually understands how to develop the Northern Sea Route. It can do it safely. It can do it with modern technology like icebreakers, and also Russia has a right to develop the Northern Sea Route, costs and environmental damage, etc., set aside. And so putting it all together, we observe 4 following narratives. These were omnipresent throughout the entire set of 4,000 or so posts that we looked at. The Northern Sea Route is key for Russia, China, and BRICS to diminish Western hegemony, promote the non-dollar currencies, and spur economic growth. NATO, the EU, the US, etc., are responsible for inhibiting Russia's growth and endangering Russia's security. That was a key narrative throughout. Russia possesses the tools, equipment, vessels, and technology to safely develop the Northern Sea Route, and the Northern Sea Route will benefit the world with faster shipping times, lower costs, new partnerships, which are already in development between Russia and China. But one interesting thing, just quickly, because I'm coming up on time, we saw a 238% increase from last year in state media content mentioning the Northern Sea Route, and 60% of it came from Pravda. Engagement, however, fell. So I talked about LLM grooming. This was one key pattern that we saw when we did our first analysis of LLM grooming. We're continuing to research the Northern Sea Route, etc., in this space, but we found that the number of views achieved on this content actually fell by 31% year over year, while again the content actually increased in volume by 200%, which indicates to us that a lot of this stuff from Pravda is, again, not intended for human consumption. So this is going to be something we'll have to keep looking at, but it's interesting nonetheless. And yeah, Arctic nations have to respond to this somehow. I'll leave that to all the science people to figure out. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Ben, and I'm inviting Ksenia.
Hello, everyone. So while you heard Ben about the disinformation patterns regarding the Northern Sea route, I'm going to present what is actually going on the Northern Sea route as we monitor and try to analyze it through scarce sources that we have now. Keeping in mind that the availability of information, like the true information from Russian side, is getting reduced from year to year significantly. I will talk more about this. So, yeah, first. Just want to recommend you our recent study about the Northern Sea route, published last year. We have a couple of copies here. If you want to read it, you can grab them after the session, or you can go online and read it as well. We tried to summarize what we know about the Northern Sea route, what are the current developments, and why Russia wants to develop it so much, why there is so much fuss about it, and what kind of risks it poses to the global climate and Arctic environment. So, during past several years, Russia was announcing record cargo volumes on the Northern Sea route, and each year they were hitting the record, according to officials, although the surplus was just few percentages. You can see it from the graph. The cargo volumes shipped on the Northern Sea route are like in dark blue, and as you can see, it doesn't really grow that much, and last year it seemed to decline a bit. Although usually there should be an official figure for the last year already in mid-January, this year it's not yet out, because we assume that the volume is a little bit less, and officials just don't want to put themselves under Putin's eyes. So reporting that the goal is far from reach. So we still might see another record if Russian authorities decide to count the cargo volume using a different creative methodology, which they usually show when they want to somehow manipulate the numbers. But anyway, compared with the ambitious plans, which are in light yellow or light orange, the reality doesn't look so great, and there is not something that they can be proud about. Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the following economic sanctions clearly had negative impact on that. In particular, sanctions against two main industrial sites, the Arctic LNG 2 project and the Vostok oil drilling project. Bear in mind that 85% of cargo on the Northern Sea route is LNG, oil, and the mineral resources shipped out for export from Arctic mining sites. And this situation should remain even according to Russian plans, so even expanding. When you speak about transit, the share is very small. It's orange on the graph. And even plans are not so big. So the plans for transit is to reach 10 million tons by 2035. And the figure is very approximate without the real ground for that. It just, they had to put something in the strategy, so they put this 10 million tons. So almost all transit was between Russia and China, mainly shipping oil from Murmansk to Chinese ports. And although this cargo volume is negligibly small for Chinese economy, Russian authorities try to create an image that there is a positive development and put a lot of hope on Chinese interests in this route. What we saw from Ben's presentation, that China was the main second word in this analysis. They also try to involve China in investing in the port infrastructure along the Arctic, which means that Russia actually doesn't have enough own sources to create and to develop the sea route, the Northern Sea route. And there was no fully international transit for 3 years since 2022, but last year there was one Chinese-controlled company sent one container ship from China to Europe. And this year, South Korean company announced that they want to perform a voyage from Korea to Europe via the Northern Sea route in September. Which is basically a worrying signal that despite all the concerns, more countries want to try to use it. And so that legitimize using the Northern Sea route, normalize it, and maybe falling for some of the narratives that it has future, it's safe, and it can be developed safely. Another declaration of the Russian authorities is that they're on track for building up enough search and rescue infrastructure along the route. But looking at the map with the SAR centers, it's clear that there are very few of them which exist, and also very few of them that planned, especially in the eastern part. The need to build more centers and more search and rescue vessels is constantly repeated at all international meetings by Russian authorities that we follow in Russian media. But what we really observe is constant delays. So, according to plans, 10 new Arctic rescue centers should have been constructed already in 2015, which was not the case. So only 3 of them were constructed, were opened. And 46 new search and rescue vessels should be built by 2030. But what we see now is only 13 are working on the Northern Sea route. And 11 ships are ordered to shipyards. So it's no way they will reach this number by 2030. There is a lack of financial resources and shipbuilding capacities for that. And also the home ports for those vessels are mainly Murmansk, Arkhangelsk, Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, and Korsakov. All of these ports are not on the Northern Sea route as of the legal definition of it. Which means that to reach out to the, if something happens on the Northern Sea route, it will take significantly more time to reach the ship. So it shows that despite some attempts to improve the search and rescue infrastructure, the reality is still the same. If an accident happens on the NSR, a ship will have to wait weeks for help. And we see how ships stuck in the ice wait a week or 2 weeks or even more sometimes for the help. And in case of an oil spill, it's almost impossible to react timely. Another myth spread by Russian media is that shipping along the Northern Sea route is completely safe and there were no accidents since Rosatom became the administrator of the route. It is, though, important to notice that since 2023, Rosatom stopped including accidents and incident statistics in its annual reports. So we just can gather this information through journalists monitoring the navigation and accidental reports of local authorities who sometimes publish what's happened there and their response to it. While in the end there were no major accidents observed last year, it started with a collision between the nuclear icebreaker, 50 Years of Victory, and the cargo vessel in January 2025. So there were some incidents, of course. Fortunately, no major damages happened to both ships. They continued their voyages on their own. Specifically, we can point situations when ships were caught in ice and waited for help for weeks, as I already mentioned. And it happened to vessels with no ice class, as well as to vessels with relatively high ice class, like Arc 4 vessels. And usually it took around a week to overcome the icy obstacle, to find another path, or to wait for icebreaker to clear the path. And it obviously adds time to their voyage, which cannot be expected at the beginning, and creates this unexpectancy for the voyage of the ship, reducing commercial attractivity of it. And also, we observe such incidents with ships caught in ice, including in September month. September is the month with the least ice coverage along the route, but still such cases happen during this month. And sometimes, but that's more like November, December, it wasn't possible to the ship to reach the destination port at all, even with the assistance of an icebreaker. So while observing a reduction of ice coverage as a result of the global warming, it doesn't mean easier navigation automatically. In fact, it leads to more changeable weather, ice conditions, unstable and dangerous navigation. Special attention should be given to accidents with oil spills because there is no technology to effectively clean oil spills from icy waters, and because there is a rising amount of shadow fleet tankers navigating the route. In 2025, there were 100 shadow fleet ships observed on the Northern Sea route, which got permission to navigate on it. And 38 of them were oil and oil product tankers. 13 of them were with no or low ice class. So that's the ships posing like specific risk. So there are two main concerns regarding potential oil spills on the route. The first is the Russian tradition of hiding accidents. If something happens, it is more likely that we know it from the international journalists monitoring it through satellites, or than from Russian authorities or companies. And the second thing is that the infrastructure is not ready to respond effectively to any accident. Here are some examples of the most populated Arctic region, Murmansk, where we have more information of what's happening. And the Kola Bay, where Murmansk is located, is one of the dirtiest water areas in Russia, also because of frequent oil spills there. And even though everyone knows that there are frequent oil spills there, there are search and rescue infrastructure in the port. Still, some spills are not treated at all. Some spills that authorities are getting to know about them from environmental activists. Some of them are just, sometimes they treat it, especially when they need to report and to prepare to some major events in the region. And also from the major spill event in the Kerch Strait in the end of 2024, we can see how Russia generally responds to such accidents, even with in the sea with more favorable conditions compared to the Arctic, and right next to the port with significant amount of search and rescue vessels. They were late and couldn't respond timely and efficiently to this major oil spill. So you just can imagine what can happen in the Arctic. It will just there, and that's it. So what is Russia the most proud about, as also Bent talked before, the nuclear icebreakers. But here the situation is also not that bright. There are 8 icebreakers working on the route now, but half of them were built like in the recent 5 years, and half of them are quite old, which will 2030. 4 new icebreakers are in the process of construction. But yeah, you can see that 11, and you cannot count 11, it's only 9. But the authorities talk about 11 icebreakers, so probably they won't decommission a couple of the old ones. So the construction of icebreakers faced problems during the imposition of international sanctions to Russia that clearly set precedents for delays and questioned the availability and the capacity for construction the most powerful icebreaker of a new series, the Rossiya. It was delayed for 5 years to be built, and it's still not. I'm not sure that it will be built by 2030. So, yeah. Finally, which is also important, speaking about nuclear technology in ships, that Russia doesn't have necessary technology and capacity to respond to major accidents with nuclear vessels. For example, in case of sinking, and sunken nuclear submarines are still there in the north, and there are no real plans to defuse them, although some of them pose significant radiation risks. Yeah, and in the conclusion, the Northern Sea route is far from being a competitive trade route between Asia and Europe, compared with traditional routes. But it doesn't mean that we should ignore what Russia is doing there and its plans to expand mining and shipping in the Arctic. The current Russian regime needs the Northern Sea route to ship Arctic natural resources and increase its presence in the Arctic to dominate the region. China and other countries using the route directly and indirectly help Russia to reach these goals by legitimizing and normalizing unsustainable shipping practices in the Arctic, and potentially by investments in infrastructure and mining projects. Russian mining and shipping activities in the Arctic are highly unsustainable, and there is no political will to mitigate environmental and climate impact from those activities. So to reduce this impact and potential severe risks, the international community should take measures to force Russia to reduce its activity in the Arctic, and it can include sanctions on the Arctic mining projects, as well as shipping, opposing the intensification of shipping along the Northern Sea route, and setting strict international rules for Arctic shipping. Thank you.
Thank you, Ksenia. So, and I invite all our speakers to join me on the stage. Please, Sean, Thomas, Ben, take a seat. And yeah, I have several questions to the speakers, and then I will open for the questions from the audience. So, we have only 2 mics, but I hope we will share it. I have a question to Dr. Sean Pryor. From a policy standpoint, how much damage can disinformation actually do, and can it realistically delay or weaken environmental regulations in the Arctic?
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to join you today. Yes, I think that disinformation does a lot of damage in terms of policy development and in terms of governance of resources and activities in the Arctic. And I'll just say a few words about something that I work on and so have direct knowledge of. One of the issues that is very important to the Clean Arctic Alliance is trying to address the emissions of black carbon from shipping. Black carbon is a super pollutant. It goes up into the atmosphere, it settles out very quickly, and when it settles onto snow and ice, it speeds up the melting and has implications both for the environment of the Arctic but also for the environment of the planet, because when it settles onto land-based ice, it increases global sea level rise. The discussions around regulating black carbon emissions, at the moment it is completely unregulated. The discussions around regulation have been going on for around 15 years now. And during that time, and in fact in the latest meeting, which is taking place next week at the International Maritime Organization, Russia has submitted into that process a number of papers where it makes claims that there isn't an impact from black carbon, there isn't a significant impact from shipping as a potential source against the other types of sources, and that there is a need for more measurement and more understanding of the issue before we make any decisions around policy and regulation. But that is against a backdrop of a huge amount of science and work published by the Arctic Council and under the auspices of the Arctic Council, and not just by one part of the Arctic Council, by the Assessment, Monitoring the Arctic Assessment Monitoring Programme, by the Expert Group on Black Carbon and Methane, by the Protection of the Arctic Marine Environment working group that works on shipping. So in the face of science, in the face of a lot of international policy, Russia is undermining the arguments.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Continuing all this, Ben in his presentation mentioned that a lot of narratives that we have, a lot of people don't check what they see, they continue spreading it. So my next question to Thomas, as a journalist, where do you see the line between legitimate debate and coordinated disinformation? And is that line becoming harder to defend in Arctic reporting?
First of all, I have to say that the short answer to your question is, as long as we stay to facts, it is not difficult at all to define that lane. And for us in journalism, that is the key answer. Talking about Russian Arctic, that is, of course, getting harder and harder. First of all, because journalism is about being on spot, on site, talking to the people. And we don't have access to the Arctic anymore. And this doesn't go only for me as a journalist from Europe. It's also the main problem for Russian journalists today in Moscow, that they have to either be on a press tour organized by Rosneft or Gazprom and seeing the bright side of the sun, and are not able actually to enter any of the controversial areas on their own and do their own investigations. So it's becoming a harder and harder problem to define what is truth and what is the false narratives in the Arctic, both for us that doesn't have access and for journalists inside Russia that are in the area.
Okay, but let's continue the thing. So it's hard, but do you have any ideas, examples, what we can do to mitigate this information gap, with we have the lack of access to this proven data? So any ideas, any advice, what, as a from journalists, as a scientist, as a question to the whole panel. So how can we mitigate this information gap?
Ksenia, you ended your presentation by showing the overview of the nuclear-powered icebreakers that Rosatom now is developing. Last week, Vladimir Putin visited some school class of students talking about the development of exactly those new submarines, the Yakutia, the Chukotka, the Stalingrad and Leningrad, and whatever they are naming their icebreakers nowadays. And then he said to the biggest icebreaker of them all, Razia, which is a giant icebreaker that they are going to use on the multiple-year ice in the eastern part of the northern sea route. And Putin said, without being questioned, that this icebreaker will be out sailing and up and running by 2030, and everything is going as projected, as planned. But check the webcam. This icebreaker is under development at Igor Sechin's shipyard in Bolshoi Kamen, the Svesta, in Russia's Far East. And this dock where this icebreaker is being built is online. Everyone can check it on the webcam. And I had to go in because I was, wow, what is it? Has a lot of things happened? So I compared a photo screenshot that I took from Bolshoi Kamen webcam exactly a year ago in November 2024, with or a bit more than a year ago, with last week. No, it was maybe half a meter of superstructure on this giant icebreaker that were in difference from a year ago. So no, they are lying. And for us in media, we have to, okay, we don't use the word lying because that's intentional. I don't know, Putin probably don't have access to the webcam, so he has some advisors that have told him that everything is going according to schedule because no one dared to speak against the president. But please check realities. And although we are not able to travel in the Russian Arctic, there are webcams. There are a lot of local resources. There is more than 1 million Russians that have left the country after 2022 and are living around in Europe. And every one of them are talking with their former colleagues in the industry, in schools, academia, in journalism, friends, neighbors, and we can interview them. So, but it's harder, but it's still doable.
Okay, thank you.
Facts matters.
Any other comments from the panel on this question? Okay, then we have time to questions from the audience. Any questions? Yeah, please, you will be the first, then the second. Please, the man here. State your name and where you're from, and then give your question.
Hi. My name is Elias. I'm from Arctic Today. My question is rather simple. Like, we have known for more than 10 years that Russia is conducting disinformation influence operations in the West. And especially now, if we look at the recent release from the Epstein files, we know how insidious this actually has been and how many Western actors have been involved in this at a high level. So my question is rather simple. Why do you think that Western governments and intelligence operations have been so ineffectual at countering and dealing with Russian misinformation in the West? Thank you.
Take a stab at that one to start.
Please.
Is that on? Yeah?
It should be, yeah.
Cool. You know, my first kind of gut answer to this is we have norms and rules. We have freedom of speech. In authoritarian countries, you know, the government spends hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, euros, whatever, a year on these kinds of operations. I mean, the IRA factory in St. Petersburg that was operational for a long, long time was costing a lot of money. It still does, I'm sure. And a Western government, whether it's, you know, a government in Europe or something even like Australia, New Zealand, I mean, all over the globe, a democratic government isn't going to have the same ability to use state resources the other way, because we have freedom of speech. If people want to consume this bad information, they, you know, unfortunately, in many places have a right to. You know, unfortunately or not, I guess that's a judgment for everyone to make. But so the response is maybe something like Finland is doing, right? Media literacy training in schools, pre-bunking, inoculation. These are all good steps to take. Not perfect, but unfortunately, these steps, as good as they are, even have become politicized. I mean, I'm from the U.S. originally. We all know how that's going. And so it's really difficult to kind of punch back when you have to follow the norms and rules. If you want to dedicate money to a program to fund resistance to this, it has to go through your legislature, and that takes time, going through committees, blah, blah, blah. There's the old Soviet handbook, right? If you want to slow something down, raise a point of order every single time. And unfortunately, we kind of do this to ourselves and shoot ourselves in the foot.
Okay, thank you. There was another question. Please, can you give the microphone?
Thank you. My name is Mirjana Tomic. I'm the head of seminars and talks on politics and media in Europe and Vienna. Ksenia was my speaker, brilliant as always. I have a question for the American speaker. I have several questions. First of all, you were talking about Pravda Network and its connection to Kremlin. Please explain the exact nature. That's first question. Because before, the different propaganda networks were not really related to Kremlin. They were competing for the money from Kremlin. So please explain that. Second, you mentioned sabotage. Could you please explain exactly which sabotage you are referring to? And at the end, I didn't quite get where the propaganda, how you explain propaganda, because you were explaining Russian point of view. You may agree or disagree, but I didn't see where the misinformation there was. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. The first question, sorry, propaganda third.
Sabotage the second,
Sabotage
and
second.
Pravda Network,
Pravda, yes.
and real connection to
Explain exactly
Kremlin.
how it works. I
Yes,
mean, technically
sure.
how it works. Thank you.
Yeah, so the Pravda network, essentially it's a big giant portal for reposting various state media. So there's a number of different agencies that it's connected to. For instance, one is this kind of social design agency, which in essence is, you know, maybe not a direct organ of the Kremlin, but it's one that receives lots of funding from it, resources and things. And the Social Design Agency is just one of these kind of threat actors, which this Pravda network has been attributed to. There's some others. Happy to follow up with some of the more technical resources. There are some folks that are very technical on the back end and exact attribution to that nature. But the Social Design Agency is one of them. In terms of sabotage, I mean, there's been plenty, I mean, sabotage, you know, all over the place, cable cutting here or there, perhaps not so much in the Arctic versus the Baltics, but in general is what I meant by this. And then, sorry, third was propaganda, yes. Yeah, so yes, you're right. In and of itself, right, these are narratives that people might disagree with or agree with. I guess where the propaganda aspect comes in is we look at the forums where these are being promoted, right? These are alternative media sources, such as Gab, Getter, Fediverse, Truth Social, WhatsApp communities, Telegram groups, etc. So the people that are monitoring these kinds or not monitoring, sorry, that are taking part in the discussions there, you know, these are folks that have a higher propensity in many cases, at least I guess I'm speaking from a US perspective, but also I think this applies to Europe. The folks that are in there are not a fan of mainstream news. They're very skeptical of institutions. The average person in, you know, say a right-leaning Telegram group, this is where many of these posts were resurfacing. So that's what the propaganda aspect is. So the narrative itself, yes, you're right, like it's a narrative. You agree with it, you disagree with it. But where they're being projected, where they're being aimed, and who's consuming them, that's sort of that intentional portion. Yes, but so I mean, I'm talking about intent in this case, right? So I mean, I agree that narrative of itself, right? I mean, Russia's point of view is, yeah, if we do the Northern Sea route, we take down Western, you know, hegemony. That's a true belief that they have in their head, right? Disagree or agree. But when it's being repurposed by this Pravda network, and it's being reposted in Telegram groups that have members who are skeptical of institutions, skeptical of democracy, that's malign intent. Okay, well, you know, fair enough. We don't have to agree. Fair enough.
Okay.
Democracy.
That's about discussion. So any questions from audience? Yeah, I see, please.
Gunnar Sander from the Norwegian Institute for Water Research. Having followed developments of Arctic shipping the last 25 years, I'm tempted to say that the picture you draw now is nothing new. If you go back to the 2009 Arctic Council assessment on Arctic shipping, they made a projection of what would happen the next 10 years. And they said that the next 10 years, Arctic shipping will be dominated by what they call destination shipping, meaning shipping going in and out of the Arctic, and the transit shipping, meaning the shipping between continents, will be minimal. And even before the Russian full-scale attack on Ukraine, and before the Western sanctions, the daily traffic through the Northern Sea route in transit was less than 1 day traffic in the Suez Canal. Then came the Western sanctions, and you see a clear break. And nowadays, I assume there is absolutely no Western ship owner that will send his or her vessel through the Northern Sea route. So the outlook for transcontinental shipping is rather gloomy. However, as your figures also show, the destinational shipping is growing. And there I will challenge some of your storylines, because with a colleague of mine, I have analyzed 10 years of Arctic shipping data. And we see that especially in the Kara Sea, there has been a tremendous growth in shipping activities. You can't deny that. I mean, despite all the problems you tell about, they have at least managed to increase their shipments. And what is also quite, well, you may say impressive, is that they have managed to increase ship traffic in winter in the Kara Sea. Of course, for the purposes that you mentioned, export of minerals, export of oil and gas, and so forth. So, seen from the Russian eyes, it's not completely gloomy, but I mean, I appreciate listening to what you tell about the problems, but this is what Russia has struggled with for decades in development of their infrastructure in the Arctic.
And your question?
This is a comment.
Okay. Okay, we appreciate it. So we have one more question here, please.
Can I
you
just
can
comment?
give a comment back.
I absolutely agree with you. The picture I wanted to show that it's what actually happens contradicts the narrative and promotion of the Northern Sea route as an alternative to Suez Canal. This narrative Russia is trying to put this narrative in media. And I'm trying to show that no, it's not like that. But at the same time, you're also right, Russia is increasing shipping for the purpose of exporting LNG and oil. That's why there were more shipping in the Kara Sea from Sabeta to Europe, basically, and now also from Sabeta to Asian countries, or from Murmansk to China. And there are plans to expand shipping in the Northern Sea route, also connected to expansion of gas and oil drilling. So why they projected 90 million tons by 2030? Because they wanted to open full operation of the Arctic LNG 2, which is another project on Yamal, in Yamal region, which will bring another 15 additional ships with Arc 7 ice class to Kara Sea, which didn't happen because of the sanctions. Also for the oil projects, Prirazlomne, yes, it's also adding some ships and all-year navigation in this part of the Arctic. And the Vostok oil, again, the same region. And again, it didn't happen just because of the sanctions. That's why sanctions can work if we want to reduce the traffic and oil drilling in the Arctic, and they should be continued and expanded.
Yeah, Sean, please.
Thanks. And I'd just add as well that, yes, I agree that the numbers aren't increasing dramatically, but I think that's all part of the misinformation and the confusion. But what we are seeing happen is increasing numbers or interest in ships that don't have adequate ice strengthening, ships that don't have adequate training, crews that don't have adequate training, because there is this perception that the Northern Sea route is open and open to almost anybody. And so I think this is all part of the danger and part of the risk. And you referred to a vessel that was stuck and needed support. There was one recently that couldn't transit, that had tried to. And it was only a few years ago when there were a whole group, I forget how many, 18, 20 vessels stuck in ice. 21 vessels stuck in ice. Unfortunately, there were no casualties that time, and everything, the ice changed and they got icebreakers out to them, and things were okay. But one day, that's not going to be the case. And so I think the danger is the perception.
Thanks, Sean. And we have one more question, please.
Is this open?
Yes.
Hi, Leif Lundsman. I'm a journalist and a fact checker from Denmark. I have no question. This is just a nasty remark to the map behind you on the screen. There's a giant island below the text with a label saying Denmark. Just talking about fact checking, it's actually called Greenland.
Yes, of course. You're right.
We'll check it and change it, of course. Thanks. Any more questions from the audience? Yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Tine Jonassen. I'm a journalist with Hard North News. This is not really about the NSR, but you briefly touched in on Greenland and the narrative that is being told us from an American view that there's lots of Russian and Chinese activity in Greenland. This is being said from the American side, but is this Russian propaganda being planted into the US, being planted into Europe?
I think it's just American propaganda. And one more question coming up, but I think everything coming out of DC about Greenland, it's just BS. It's total BS, and it's 100% propaganda from direct DC.
The most active corner, please.
If I may comment on this, actually, it's written in the Danish Intelligence, Security and Danger papers that there are a lot of Russian and Chinese threat in the sailing around in Greenland. So actually this was a public Danish government statement 1 year ago. When Trump repeated that and quoted that, we changed our mind and now call it American propaganda, just like you. But actually, the source was the Danish intelligence. And it's still there in written language.
Okay. More questions? Yeah, please.
Yeah, sorry, this is not my field at all, but you, Benjamin, mentioned the grooming of LLMs by creating fake content, and you, Xenia, mentioned that real content, for instance, on accidents and oil spills, is not being released and never gets to the internet from Russian government side, at least. So how we as citizens/consumers can do something about this, and do the different AI companies do something about this, actually?
Yeah, on LLM grooming, I mean, I teach like an undergrad course, and what I tell people is that like the kids in my class, like that they need to talk to LLMs and interact with LLMs like they would Wikipedia, right? Like you would never trust Wikipedia fully, and you cite it as the only source in your research paper or something, because theoretically someone could go on there and just edit and say whatever they want, and it doesn't get taken down, and you don't know that it's fully peer-reviewed, legitimate, etc. And so we have to incorporate this kind of literacy training, information literacy, in our curriculums, to have people really understand that, even sitting up here, I mean, AI models, they're kind of a black box. The companies aren't really transparent. Europe is really the only place that has some modicum of regulation that is supposed to require them to be somewhat transparent with the Digital Services Act. Researchers are theoretically supposed to have access to publicly available data and be able to do these, kinds of analysis. But still, companies push back all the time. There's, an investigation, multiple investigations that have been opened into X, for instance, because of their refusal to be transparent, even though the law is that they have to be transparent. And so in terms of, AI models, yeah, they absolutely do pull in bad information of all kinds, whether it's Russian, American, from all over, right? And it's kind of a black box. We don't really know how exactly they work. Same for algorithms and our personalized feeds. They're still kind of a black box. So yeah, I think the biggest thing there is, what can we do as citizens is just be careful and double check, find multiple sources for information that you're reading, and just try to be as deliberate with your consumption as possible.
Okay, thank you. Is there one more question?
Thank you, and thank you for your discussion. It's very interesting. I'm a Danish politician. I just want to clarify. We don't see Chinese or Russian ships outside Greenland. It's not something we see. And we do not see an imminent threat from Russia or Greenland, Russia or China towards Greenland at the moment. So I agree, it's coming from the US and it's a misinformation campaign. But however, it is very clear that both Russia and China is more interested in the Arctic, of course, but not specifically towards Greenland. It's just to clarify, since there's a bit discussion about that.
Okay, thank you for the comment.
And I can just add, we've recently done an analysis of Arctic shipping. It was undertaken by a group called Energy and Environmental Research Associates, and that bears up what you say. Yes, there are Arctic and Chinese ships there are Russian and can't get the words right. Russian and Chinese ships operating in the Arctic, but not especially around Greenland. I think it is only fair to say, though, that there is a lot of Chinese investment across the whole of the Arctic, both in Russia, Greenland, Iceland, elsewhere probably as well. But no, I think certainly the work we've published recently bears that out.
Okay, please.
Hi, my name is Edith Sepp and I'm from Estonia, and my background is not in Arctic but in film and media. And that's why I wanted to bring out what you said and what is the way out, and saying that how can we stop it or what can we do. Well, we in our industry, we obviously deal a lot with media literacy. Even when I'm running Estonian Film Institute, it's nothing about so much about production anymore or distribution, but it is about how to teach children and also how do you teach in a very early stage about what is propaganda and what is not, what is the way of reading the film, the way it is done, not the way it is put into your head. So media literacy is, I think, the way to put into focus. So since it's the last comment, I think it's going to ring in our ears when we leave the room.
Any comments on this? Yeah, we discussed it today during before. Because we need to teach some critical mind, because as we see, I don't want to like draw a line between the youth and old people, but we see that critical minds are going down nowadays when they're reacting on the posts that sharing. So we have TikTok, we have Instagram. Some people see like the post with million views, and it's definitely propaganda, but they continue to sharing it, and that we have this result. Okay, we have some more time, and yeah. There was the first, and then, yeah.
Thank you. I'm Dita from Elise Madusavik, the University of Greenland. I just took note of you mentioning vast Chinese investments in the Arctic and also in Greenland. I was wondering if you would elaborate on those investments in Greenland, because they are not major to my knowledge.
Sorry, I don't think I said the word vast, but I don't look at investments, I look at shipping, I'm afraid. So I can't give specific examples, but I do know that there has been investment in port development, trade routes across the Arctic from China, and I'd understood that that was in Russia, Greenland and Iceland in particular, probably in other areas. I know in Europe there's been Chinese investment in a number of the ports in the North Sea and in the Mediterranean Sea as well. So I think it's all about securing their trade routes, but I can't give specific examples. You'd need to speak to an economist, I think. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I cannot give you specific examples of Greenland because I don't work on Greenland. I work on the Russian coast. But the example of Arctic investments in from China is also surrounded with different narratives which are not specifically can be true. Because just an example. Last year or the year before, there was like a lot of information and news items about Russia and China signed an agreement for major investments from China to the Arkhangelsk port because they want to develop this frequent line between China and Arkhangelsk. But yes, the agreement on intention was signed and then nothing. There was no Chinese company established, no joint company established, no Chinese real money going into the port infrastructure. And we are not sure that they will, because China is not investing everywhere. It promises and saying that, yes, we can invest, we want to invest, but whether they will invest, that's a question.
Thank you. In that case, may I direct a comment to that?
Sure.
To my knowledge, the primary investment in Greenland from Chinese hand was the intended iron ore mine of Isua near the Nuuk capital, which was never actually actioned upon. It is non-existent. And back in, I believe, 17 or 18, there were Chinese intentions to invest in building new international airports across Greenland, which was securitized by the US and later on stopped. The investments were then made through a Danish scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. And Thomas, you had some...
I could just add that we in the media are also partly guilty in this building of the frame of China in the Arctic. And it started after the Secretary of State had his kind of infamous speech at the Arctic Council meeting in Rovaniemi some few years ago, stating that the Chinese Navy is now entering into the Arctic, something that is not factually true. China have never had any submarines sailing the Arctic. China do not have any nuclear-powered submarines that are capable or logically going to be deployed to Arctic water. And when Western politicians, not only 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., but also European, including Norwegians, are talking about this upcoming Chinese military presence in the Arctic. Well, what are we talking about? In 2024, there were 3 uniformed Coast Guard observers from Shanghai at a joint exercise on search and rescue in the Kola Bay just outside Murmansk. They did not bring their own vessel. Last year, it made big headlines that the Chinese Navy was sailing into the Arctic. Well, they did not pass by the Bering Strait and was definitely far away from ice-covered waters. But yes, they did have a cooperation with the Russian Navy at that time. And as Ksenia says, all these letter of intentions that are signed in Arkhangelsk and so on, it is still just paperwork on the civilian side. When Lavrov is saying that, well, if our Western partners, you can still call it partners for one or another reason, is not going to cooperate with us, we are turning east to other partner nations. It's not a fact. There ain't no big Chinese investments in the area. When we say that there are Chinese research vessels, if they are totally civilians or not, well, in 2024, there was one Chinese vessel. It was the Shuilong, the Snow Dragon, that sailed an Arctic route. And last season in 2025, it was 3 Chinese icebreakers that sailed the Arctic. That is not very much. So let's be sober when we talk about the Arctic, whether it is from United States or us here in Europe. We don't actually see them very much. If you want to see Chinese investments, go to East Africa. Go to the port of Mombasa in Kenya. Go and see what really Chinese Silk Road investments look like. I don't say it's not going to happen 10 years from now, but I think China is not very eager to team up with a war-mongering nation like Russia with all the challenges they have in the Arctic. It's not on the top of Beijing's list of infrastructure investments.
Thank you. We had one question here. Second row, please. Yeah, here.
Thank you. Thank you for interesting talk and discussion. I'm wondering, what do you, the panel, think about the media coverage of the NSR? Is it balanced, or do we fall prey to Putin's propaganda?
Since I'm from the media and have the microphone, I think that we see a big difference. Media is not media. I think there is a much more sober approach among Nordic medias. We are Arctic nations. You are sitting in Bodø. We are sitting on the coast to the Barents Sea. Finland is our neighbor. I think that media have a challenge on eating the served propaganda, the narrative of the Arctic, the further away from the Arctic they are coming. So if you're talking about headlines in Wall Street Journal, The Economist, New York Times, etc., the New York Times latest Svalbard story, oh my God, it's wow, 2-3 weeks ago. It doesn't fit with the realities that we that are sitting in the ice-covered waters and watching is looking like. But Nordic media either is from Denmark that have the experience on Greenland, Norway that are big shipping nations and Arctic explorers and have the Svalbard area, or Finland that have is the best icebreaker builders in the world. We know what it's all about. So the more European and American journalists we could invite to come up here and stay for more than 48 hours. So this what we, maybe it's a bad word, but we call it parachuting journalism. You're sitting home in London and Frankfurt, in Paris, and and Washington, and you create your story, and then you just fly up, jump down, you do the interviews to have the narratives fulfilled, and if you don't get your own photo, you post a photo of an icebreaker, of an polar bear when you are back. But please, international journalists, come and stay in the newsrooms up north for a longer period than 48 hours. Maybe some others have more comments.
Any more? Okay, and we have one more question from...
Well, in fact, my audience are journalists in Central Europe, and you're absolutely right in what you said. And listening to you, I have two questions. One refers to this reportage on Svalbard. I've read it. Please tell us what was wrong in this, because I live in Vienna, I don't live in Svalbard. And the second question is probably stupid, but could you, how would you explain to the audience in Central, or let's say audience that is educated but is not expert in the Arctic, what does China have in this part of Europe? Have they invested? What do they have? What do they own? Where have I start having my doubts. Thank you.
The answer to your last question is the easiest one. There are a couple of stores where they sell Chinese electric cars. It's coming more and more of them. That's what we see. I don't say that's that, but the most visible part of it. I think it will be hard for China to continue on the approach they had 10 years ago when they wanted to buy property next door to military exercise areas in northern Finland, when they wanted to invest in harbor facilities on either it was the northernmost part of Norway or on the east coast of Iceland, or so we heard here also from Greenland. To your first question about the New York Times, I love the New York Times. It's very, I mean, it's never been more important to subscribe on New York Times than it is nowadays, and of course because what's happening in the United States. But the Svalbard story, they are framing a picture of Svalbard as the place in the geopolitical hotspots where big nations, either it's United States, Europe, or Asia, China, will eventually have a war, a kind of conflict over the resources and the shipping. Come on. There are no areas in the Arctic that are disputed territory. Maybe with the exception of the seafloor at the North Pole, which is 4,000 meters deep, and the man that or woman that is going to develop technology for deep sea mining or oil exploration or whatever it is in those areas that is going to be settled by the UN Convention of the Continental Shelf, that person is not born yet, so we can relax. It's not happening tomorrow, and this idea that shipping and resources in the Arctic, no, that is not what is causing conflict in the Arctic. What is causing conflict in the Arctic is the very same that we saw during the Cold War. It's the shortest distance for exchanging nuclear weapons in case of an escalating conflict. And that is mainly today driven by Russia's Arctic militarization on the Franz Josef Land, on Novaya Zemlya, not least to talk about all the new nuclear weapon systems that are tested and developed and finally will be deployed in the Arctic from submarines out of the Kola Peninsula, or these crazy weapons that they are testing, nuclear-powered cruise missiles and nuclear-powered underwater drones, etc. That is what one day is going to cause a conflict in the Arctic, that by accident something is happening, this arms race that is now taking place. 72 hours from now, the last remaining arms reduction treaty we have on this planet on nuclear weapons is expiring on Thursday evening. The easiest place for Russia to increase their number of nuclear warheads is in the Arctic. It is on board those vessels that are hiding under the ice cap. So it's the traditional nuclear arms race that is potentially and God forbid, causing a conflict in the Arctic, and not any kind of sailings or hunt for resources, etc. Well, but I love the New York Times. Yes.
But in terms of Chinese interests, like in Russia, they clearly own a share in Yamal LNG project, 16%. They also own a share in Arctic LNG 2 project, which they frozen since 2022, but still. In Norway, they were interested in developing relations with Kirkenes port. It didn't happen because Norway was a little bit scared for security reasons, but they were in talks with the port authorities and the mayor of the city just recently, 2 years ago, I think, explaining this as a future potential for developing of the Northern Sea Route and the Northeast Passage. Just a couple of examples.
I'd just add, talking to my colleagues in Iceland, certainly increasing their presence there as well. But one thing I would say, I think about China, and not just China, but South Korea, India as well, is what they're trying to do, I think, is engage through the political processes that exist. They're not trying to do it by subterfuge or behind people's backs or out of sight. You know, they want to be present. They want to be part of the discussion. They are now observers at the Arctic Council. They attend the meetings. They input to those processes. So I think, you know, they're not trying to do it behind people's backs. They're just trying to look out for their own interests through the systems that exist.
I think we have some comment.
Yeah, I just have a comment. Obviously, this is a.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Elias, Arctic Today.
Okay.
I'm from Iceland actually, and I just need to counter this as my friend here from Greenland did. There's no Chinese investment in Iceland at all. I've heard this repeated for a Senate committee in the U.S., but it's not true. About 12 years ago, there was Chinese interest in creating a port in the Northeast. That never materialized. That was stopped for various security reasons, etc. There's literally no Chinese direct investment in any sort of infrastructure or anything of note in Iceland. I just needed to correct that.
All right, I didn't say investment, and I was talking about the expansion of their embassy in Iceland. Maybe I'm wrong, but I was there and I was shown what was going on by an Icelandic colleague. So, but I may be wrong on that, but apparently they are increasing the size of their embassy considerably and the numbers of people that will be employed in the embassy.
The embassy is big, but I mean, I don't think it indicates any direct involvement of China in Iceland at all.
Okay, we can count employees of embassy a little bit later. Any more questions? Yeah, I see. One of the last row. Yeah.
Hi, I work for the U.S. government. My understanding is that China has been using their research vessels and autonomous underwater vehicles that are specifically designed for mapping minerals to assist, including this past year, which they were very public about, I believe, in their own reporting, mapping the areas in Russia's EEZ for minerals, and I wanted to know if your panel could comment on that.
Okay. Thomas?
No, you're right. They had an unmanned underwater vehicle, not very different from the Norwegian Hugin underwater vehicle that can do seismic, or some kind of seismic sound to look at the seafloor. That was brought in by one of the Polar Research Center, China's Polar Research Center in Shanghai's icebreaker into the Arctic along the Northern Sea routes, or if you would call it Russia's economical zone north of Siberia, yes. But I don't necessarily consider that as something very strange. I mean, Turkey is sailing the Arctic now. India have researchers in the Arctic. The Arctic is enormous. It's an ocean that is 7-8 times larger than the Mediterranean. So yeah, let's keep an eye on it, and let's believe that also China have dual use of their civilian Arctic research that could probably have some military aspects with it as well. It's no reason to be naive, but to say that it poses a major threat in the Arctic or any threats at all today, I don't think so. And I think also we should kind of follow closely the relations between Moscow and Beijing. It's a kind of also from old Cold War stories back to the days of Mao and Stalin. It's communism both at that time. Today they depend partly on each other, but they are not exactly the best friends in the class. So what Russia would like to invite China into is investments in infrastructure. China has to a quite small degree, I would argue, done that. But to believe that Russia and China will work in cooperation militarily, I have my doubts. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Please, in microphone.
Gökhan Aslan from Geological Survey of Norway. So Turkey is sailing as part of joint NATO mission in the Arctic.
Oh, no, I was mentioning Turkey's visit to Svalbard last year. It's a pure
this is for
research,
scientific.
climate, glaciology, geology.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
That's true.
No, not any military purpose,
That's
to my
true.
knowledge.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I see. One more question. Yeah.
Not a question, just a very quick comment. I just arrived, so I have no idea what you were talking about except Iceland and China. Just wanted to make a comment that the Icelandic-Chinese relationship is by far the most positive environmental impact that the Icelandic nation has made with an Icelandic-Chinese joint venture energy company, geothermal energy company now providing power for 100 million residential homes in China. So there's, it's not just a cynical thing.
Okay. We have a comment. No other comments. Yeah, I see we are almost running out of time. We have a couple of minutes to circle up and on a positive note, let's say, I have a quick question in short for every panelist. If you could change only one dominant narrative about the Arctic that circulates nowadays internationally, which would it be and why?
The Arctic is not an easy accessible area. It is still enormous challenges on ice conditions, despite everything you read about climate changes and less sea ice in the area. It is really difficult to navigate, to work, and to develop infrastructure in that area. The Arctic is not a new Middle East that will be open for the international investment community tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock.
Thank you, Sean.
I think I would have said the same. And in relation to that, I think changing the narrative around climate and the impact of climate change in the Arctic, I think it isn't well understood yet how big an impact the climate change is having in the Arctic. I've heard it said that, well, we know that the Arctic is warming up to around 4 times faster than the rest of the planet, but I've heard that in regions it might be up as much as by six times as much. And alongside that, the impact of black carbon, because I think that isn't well recognised. I think the impact of carbon dioxide is increasingly recognised now, but not so much the super pollutant side of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Ksenia?
I also agree with Thomas, and adding to that the narrative about ice-free Arctic Ocean and Northern Sea route should be added by the thought, if that happens, or when that happens, how the rest of the world will look like with such enormous global warming.
Thank you, Ksenia. Ben?
I would change the narrative coming from DC. Greenland is not American, and it never will be American.
Thank you. And as a moderator, I would like to thank all our panelists and thank you for your attention. And to end up the discussion, I would like to agree with our guest from Estonia. Did not remember your name, but I'm working in Vilnius in Lithuania, and I see every day in the local media how Belarusian and Russian propaganda and disinformation targeting people in Baltic countries. What are the results? What are the consequences of this disinformation? And I would like to end all our discussion with the question how we should fight this propaganda and how we should to teach people to fight this propaganda and disinformation. And this is the thing that we should thought about already yesterday. So let's discuss it further and find some solutions. Thank you for your attention and thank you for being with us today.